Hey everybody, welcome to Stop LAPD Spying's Gender and Sexuality. Uh, this is the first Tuesday of the month. We focus every Tuesday on a different thing. Next week will be the war on youth, the criminalization of youth through the practices of surveillance. This week is we focus on gender and sexuality. I'm Chella. I've been a coordinating team member and in Stop Billy PD spying since I don't know 8 years. I don't know. Tired of saying it. um, so my pronouns are she and they, and I want to know who's in the room. So I want to know your name, your pronoun, and let's see. Something special that happened last month. I will go first. Like I said, my name is Chella. I go by she and they, and my band got to play in Echo Park. Anybody's able to go. You're also, if you don't want to vocalize it, welcome to write it down in the chat. By the way, but yeah.
I can go. Let's see. I got to travel last month and represent the coalition at a conference in Wales, so out in the UK. So that was really nice. It was really good to see all the echoes and how many people from around the world are just citing the work and translating it into their languages, and also so that was really nice. So yeah. And yeah,
I'll jump in. Hey folks, this is Mateo speaking. I use he, him pronouns. Something special that happened last month was, our Echo Park action, where we kind of showed folks where these cameras are that LAPD installed around the park. And it was just cool to kind of reclaim that space after everything that went down there, and be there with the fence down and talk to community members, and just kind of delegitimize and learn more about those cameras and why they were implemented and how much they cost. So that felt very special, and it was a lot of fun.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I use they, them pronouns, and this is my first time at one of your webinars, and I don't know, I have a new job that I really like, so it's good.
Hey, my name is Rokaleen. I use she, they pronouns. And last month was my first trans pride, and it was amazing to see the community out and how strong it really is, and just meet so many new amazing people here in LA that I just hadn't connected with. So I'm still kind of on a high from that.
Is that it? I think that's it. So everybody, that was great. I'm actually I'm gonna be honest, I stole this from Tiff. We were talking about this last week at their webinar on I don't even remember what focus it was, but I do have a remix version of it. I want to know folks' ideas of where Pride even came from. Do folks know the history of Stonewall? And if you do, what do you know about it? Folks can raise your hand and we will let people add in. If you don't know anything, it's okay. Each one teach one. We're here to learn. Okay, thank you, Jamie. Okay. Anybody want to start? I guess I'll go. Okay, so actually it's funny because like the gay liberation movement started before the the Stonewall Rebellion. And it was funny because the Stonewall Inn was this bar in New York that the trans and queer people frequented. It was frequented a lot by the pigs, the police as well, because it was owned by the mafia. And what the mafia was doing was they would, because they saw a way to like get money, let's be real, they jacked up the prices. They like served horrible beer and they made it as like uncomfortable as shit. But people still went there because they were it was somewhere safe, right? This was around the time when like literally if you were a trans or a drag queen, you could be arrested for I think the actual law was wearing the opposite gender clothes. If you were engaged in any male on male homosexuality, you could be arrested for sodomy. And so like folks just would go there to be safe. Um, Now this was around the time that like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson to now I'm gonna be real about their identities. People, their identities have shifted. A lot of folks call them trans women. A lot of people call them drag queens. We don't know, right? We don't. They're not here to tell us. So we will just say that they were a part of the trans and queer community. There were folks who were literally doing. They were sex working themselves who were doing amazing work, right? They would, let's be real, they were sex workers who would rob Johns. I don't know if you know the term Johns mean. It means the men, the men that engage in getting with sex workers. They would rob them and use that money to support trans and queer LGBT youth, right? They also started STAR, which stood for I totally forgot what it stood for, but it was a housing group for trans and specifically trans and drag queens and gay boys. Um, but one day, literally, there was just a lot of things going on. There was a lot of like, the police had kept frequenting the Stonewall Inn. And so what happened was it just came to a head. And literally, they pushed out all the LGBT folks out of the bar, would not let anybody go in. And so folks just decided to, like, rebel, you know? There's conversations about who threw the first brick. We don't know. Folks at first used to say it was a Black trans woman. We don't know. Other folks say it was a queer lesbian who did it, who was like getting arrested. It was like, don't y'all see what's going on here? And yeah. Am I going too fast? Or are people following along? Great. Um, so folks, got tired of it. And so they, they rebelled against the police and the police state. Um, Folks did get arrested. And after that, the gay liberation movement was like put on like it was already starting, but like it was like this was like the biggest thing. And so they decided to like keep going, right? They were like, we need to keep doing stuff about this. Um, and the gay liberation movement at first was like acknowledging that like different people are impacted by the state in different ways, right? Like, you know, women still had issues with voting and other issues, like the the women's liberation movement had been going on for some time. Then they were still like fighting for their rights. Black people were fighting for their rights, and you know, and so there were like different intersectional struggles that were that the gay liberation movement were like, okay, we have to address these things too, right? And we are not for the state. We do not want to assimilate to the state. We don't want respect. We want we want them to end their like criminalization of us, right? And so a lot of, let's be real, gay white yuppie folks decided to leave and form their own movement. I forgot what it was called, and they were more focused on gay, just like the gay part of liberation. Um, yeah, it they were more about like, let's get gays in the police force, let's get gays in the military, let's get gays in government, you know, like we're normal, let's be normal, you know. It's funny because just real quick, I do want to go on a little tangent here about queer and punk as well. Around that time, punk was becoming really big as well. And then there was a lot of queer LGBT folks who were into punk as well. Um, and they were also like, yo, and punk is anti-establishment. You know, it's always been anti-establishment, anti-racist, anti all these things. And but there wasn't a lot of part a lot of queer and trans folks didn't feel comfortable and safe going to like straight punk shows, and so like it was also something that was that was something that was rising around that time as well. So there's just like all these different parallels, right? There's and now you can there's a documentary called Queer Core if you ever want to watch it. It's so great. It kind of like talks about that history, and like literally, it's also the same thing, right? Like, whereas like gay white normies wanted to be, or not even just white, right? Gay people wanted to be a part of the world. Punks were like, fuck the establishment, fuck capitalism, you know, let's burn this world. You know what I mean? Like, um, so yeah, but like yeah, so like going back to Stonewall, so after like you know they separated, it was kind of sucky how they started treating trans women, especially. There's like a video of Silva Rivera, who I am not playing it, did not find it. If you want to look it up on YouTube, you can. It's really simple to find. But when Silvia Rivera is like literally like she's pleading for like predominantly white people, she was like, thought I've gotten arrested, I've gotten beat, I've gotten my tooth knocked out by the police, standing in line with y'all and standing for y'all gay movement, and you're treating me like this. And like two of the saddest facts about Marsha P. Johnson and Silvia Rivera is Sarah Rivera died on the streets, right? And Marsha B. Johnson, we don't know how she died, but she did die in a river. They found her body in a river. So thinking about the correlation of like who starts movements, who's a part of movements, and who gets the credit, right? The movement, there was a movie called Stonewall, and it came out in, I want to say, 2014. And it literally depicted a gay white man throwing the first brick, and it was super gay and white, and it's about this guy moving from Wisconsin or some shit to New York and getting tired of it, and he's the guy that started it all, right? Like, but no, it was folks of color, it was women, it was like all these other folks, right? Um, I'm gonna stop right there. See if anybody has any questions. Any questions?
Thank you, Chela, for really giving us this background and the history as well. I mean, I think so. This, how do you think was the movement then? And we continue to see that. I mean, I'm always also looking at the log cabin Republicans, and just who are extremely right wing, but they also claim their gay identity. They're mostly almost all men as well. And with this kind of assault going on, how do you feel over time that this gay movement, which you were alluding to, and especially gay white men, which who had class privilege as well, kind of derailed the militancy, and really kind of just have became more of a hurdle in the queer liberation movement?
Yeah, I think there's always been this like, especially because there's not been a stake with a lot of white gay men when it comes to like other versions of oppressions, right? Unless they have other identities as well, right? Like I named a lot of white punks who are queer. Then they were like one of the first people that were like, fuck the police, like, but like all these other white people that want to assimilate to the culture, like we do have people who are like, oh my gosh, it's so great that we have white trans and queer people, or trans and queer people in the police, right? Or like even thinking of when Trump was in office 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and like the whole military ban, right? The and that whole situation, right? Like the the like, oh, that sucks, It people were like not really engaging in the conversation of imperialism and nationalism and how like military is a way that it exploits. Let's be real, exploits white working class people and exploits black and brown working class people. And literally, it goes to like schools and engages them and says, "Hey, it sells in this dream, but mother freakers, y'all, one of the highest populations in Skid Row is veterans. Like, um, and so we think about like how they just the access, right? The access to like wanting to be invited to the table and wanting to be invited. Like people are like, I want to be invited to the table. I'm like, no, I want to burn this table and start a new one, because this table started off as genocidal. And hello, just today, y'all corrected me. We never stopped doing something on the 4th of July. Why we would stop now? I'm like, that's real. That is so freaking real. But yeah, I think there's always just been this like, there's not been that stake. I think lately there's been more of a conversation though. I do want to get a little bit clearer. Especially after George Floyd, especially after I can't even shit. I just his name, Tony McDade. There you go. A black trans man was murdered by the state, right? By the police. Especially after that, especially after like, CC McDonald and all those things and all those stories coming out. There's been more of a conversation about the prison industrial complex. There's been more of a conversation about like the intersectionalities of like being a black trans person, and especially let's I do want to give a shout out to Genesect Gutierrez, who was one of the founders of La Familia, who literally when when Obama was like LGBT rights for all, she was like, yeah, but we are being deported, you're killing us. And the white gays looked at Genesect Gutierrez and were like, you're stopping our movement. And she was like, no. And she literally was at the White House when he said this. She's like, no, but people are dying. Trans women are dying and getting raped. Like literally, it's an injustice. You know what I mean? Um, but I think conversations, especially, let's just be real, with the libbies, with the libbies and the leftists are being had more so than it's been in the past, right? But yeah, I hope I'm making sense, y'all. I'm gonna be real. I woke up like 20 minutes ago. Anybody has another question? If you don't, I do have a lot to, like I said, I remixed some of the shit. So if y'all ready, we can go into part 2, which is what's going on now. Okay, we will go into what's going on now. As we see, Florida Don't Say Gay bill and all the anti-trans and drag legislation. And the banning of books, right? There's been a rise of anti-trans and drag legislation. But, on YouTube, I watch a lot of YouTube, y'all. On YouTube, you'll see a lot of people talk about the history of, like, the panic, like, there's a panic from, like, especially the right-wingers, especially folks who, like, don't understand trans and queerness, right? Who are saying, why is there such an uptake in kids? Because there's I guess they've done a study that says that, like, kids are more likely to identify as trans or GNC now. And it's because, like, obviously you make the world safer for them, they're going to come out. They're just going to come out. You make it safer for people to talk about what's going on with themselves. They are going to talk about what's going on. Whereas they think it's just this epidemic. They think it's transdemic, right? This queerdemic, right? And I think statewide, there's just been a massive movement from, like, you see, I'm gonna be real, you see folks who weren't that political, who are trans and queer, talk about it now. You see, I'm gonna be real, you see, I don't know if folks watch Drag Race, but RuPaul's been talking about it lately on their show. A lot of folks who've been on her show and other versions of the Drag Race saga have been talking about it and using their platforms to, like, get folks informed, as well as trans people coming out and talking about, like, Laverne Cox, Janet Mock, Our Lady J, who's a writer of Pose. I don't know if folks remember that show. That was only out for 3 seasons. It sucked that it ended. But folks are actually coming out and talking more about it and talking about what can we do, right? I remember on Instagram, there's a Black queer femme was like, what do we do when the world is hating you, the world is doing this, the world is doing that, the world is doing this. And her way of fighting, she was like, we fight and we survive. That's what we do. It's just, and for me, I saw the lineage of, like, Audre Lorde in her. I saw the lineage of fucking Marsha P. Johnson. You know, I think when it comes to locally, what's been going on, right? So last month we did a conversation with a person from Queer X, Jordan, who was a part of an uprising to challenge Pride, right? For those that don't know, Hollywood Pride, I'll call it Hollywood, I know, because we've had, like, a few prides in LA. So Hollywood Pride specifically, I don't know about the Pride that was close to me, but the Pride in Hollywood, they literally had cops, and they've always had cops, so it's nothing new, right? I think there has been a push to get them out, though, especially with Black Lives Matter joining forces with them a few years ago, but then, like, they revamped it and decided to keep the pigs on. So there's been a lot of people, like, so 3 years ago, I'll talk about my band. I had been as Chella, who's fat, black, depressed. Let's be real. I'm naming all the shit, but predominantly disabled trans Black woman who was seeing things like Tony McDade, being pushed under the rug. Hardly anybody remembers Sandra Bland, right? Just like women and trans people that are not a part of the conversation. And I was like, yo, I want to do something. And I talked to my band, and it's funny because we were just, like, coming back to like rehearse after like COVID had happened for a while, and I am immunocompromised, right? In fact, I think that year I got COVID after everything. Um, but like I was just like, I want to do something. Like let's do something. I don't know what we're gonna do, but let's do something. And Byron with this other group called Trans Latina Coalition hit me up. Byron is a comrade and a friend. I'm gonna be honest. And they hit me up and were like, "Hey, Char, I saw your post because I posted it on Facebook. What do you want to do? I'm here to back you up." And so is Bambi. Bambi Salcedo is the founder of Trans Latina Coalition. Her story is really famous. There's like a documentary about her. And I was like, okay, I just don't know what to do. And she's like, well, here's the tea with what's been going on with Christopher Street West. Long story short, like I said, folks were talking about not having cops, and then there was no clarity whether they were going to have cops or not. So I was like, okay, so who was in this group? And he was like, I don't know. I was like, okay, well, let's have a meeting. Let's do something. Let's talk about this. And so we had a meeting, and then I found out a friend of mine was working with the other group that was doing something. They weren't doing something in opposition, though. They were doing something in the group and within Christopher Street West Pride. And so I hit up my usual players. I hit up are, I'm gonna be real, DSA, because they're white and they're Libby. Stop LAPD Spine because they know the legal shit. I do hit up legal aid as well, so I don't have to deal with pigs just in case they do come. And we did like a sign making day, and we advertised that the shit out of that. We had pizza. We had a few entertainers. We had some speakers. This is a Saturday before Sunday. And then we talked about the next day. And then the next day, I get there kind of early, and I see like people are already lined up for the other protest, for the other march, and I'm kind of scared, and I'm also like, oh my god, I hope this works out, like. And then my drummer gets there, my bassist gets there, we get things together. I see other people that I know, they start easing me, and but within 20 to 30 minutes, like an hour of me getting there, police started amping shit up. And so they were like, y'all need to start. My friend Brian was like, I think now it's better than ever. And I was like, okay, let's just start. And so we started, and we did a takeover. That was our first takeover, right? I think queer apocalypse has always been this thing. I kind of not stole it, but borrowed it from a friend of mine who did this like art / installation. Oh, I'm gonna stop. Am I making sense? Do people have questions so far?
Yeah, Chela. I mean, I think I guess I do have a follow up, but this is more about also how more active anti-trans actions are on the rise in Los Angeles. So I was hoping
Yeah.
that if we can talk about that too, as to what
Oh, def.
where are we at and how do we confront those. So yeah.
Okay. So actually, that is actually a part of the conversation too. So do not worry. I'm on the train with you, Baba. I'm gonna wrap this up in a pretty little bone, like less than 6 minutes or less. Okay. And then we'll get into that, because that is like, this was also the future, right? With what's going on now, and what I see as the future of not only queer apocalypse but also other movements, right? Anyway, so so we did this takeover, and it was amazing, and we've been doing takeovers for a while. Like we've been taking over Echo Park. We've done Echo Park takeovers for Trans Day of Remembrance, what we call Trans Day of Vengeance. We've been doing trans takeovers for Pride again. We've done it every year. And this year, I tried to team up with Queer X, like I said, and there's, I don't know if folks saw, but Queer X was this youth-led trans and queer collective that they gotten arrested, and so like it was just like, you know, but yeah, we decided not to do it. We got there, and then it was just like it was a mess. We didn't have things we needed, so we decided not to do it. But we still yelled at the cops, and like we still were able to, like, you know, be there and be in a position of like the status quo. For me, queer apocalypse has, like I said, always been this like installation of like, what do we do, right? Who we are as, you know, we're going to challenge the white cishet normative um, movements that are happening, right? That's why in my queer apocalypse, most of the folks, if you do see white folks, they're either in supporting roles or they are part of my band, right? Like, but it's predominantly for like folks of color, trans and queer folks of color. Um, oh my goodness. So like, there's just been this like, there's always just this push where I'm always I'm sorry, I'm looking at a roach. I'm gonna kill it. Anyway, so like to answer Baba's point, I think that um yeah, I think there's number one, it's sad to say, but there's been a lot of criminalization of folks. Like I said, Queer X. I know some other folks in other cities did things. I know other folks didn't even like want to do things because they didn't want to rock the boat, you know, per se. I think I do see, like I said earlier, I do see a lot of celebrities stepping up to the plate and using their platforms to be like, hey, this is what's going on. This is like, these are the legislations you got to get on vote. We don't, you know, I sit here and I'm like, that's not what's going to help. That's not the best way, right? My thing is we can fight against it. I think it's crazy because a lot of the legislations that are happening are groups that have teamed up, right? It's so funny because I forgot what state it is, but there's these two different. There's a Muslim freaking coalition of folks and a Christian group of folks. They've teamed up to like stop some of the books and stop some of the like woke, you know, things within their high school, right? Um, but you also see the power of youth, right? Of youth who are trans and queer speaking out. You are seeing the power of trans and queer kids speaking out. Especially, I mean, like I said, I watch a lot on YouTube, so like, and I know y'all know that like they have a thing where they when you watch something, it kind of gives you stuff like that. So like I watch that a lot, and there's so many kids that are standing up and going to these like public council events. I do want to say that I think one of the hardest points for me was hearing what happened about 3 weeks ago in Glendale with a bunch of Armenian folks, right wing Armenian folks who are, you know, being utilized as a way to hate trans and queer Armenian folks. And I have a friend who's Armenian, who's a very good comrade. And I was like, are there any groups that are like, you know, doing stuff? And he was like, yeah, there's one big one. Um, and they're lit, you know? So I think there's always just gonna be some we're always gonna have groups to fight back. Um, I think the way we fight back is through education, through art, through let people telling their stories, and just being real, helping people survive this freaking shit. You know what I mean? Like survival is, you know, is one of the cornerstones of my life, I think. Um, it's funny because, like I said, this was remixed from last week. Just to let y'all know, I know that Mariela Saba, who's also on the coordinating team, she's been working with with a group of youth that are trans and queer youth, right? And she's taken them out to a freaking retreat, right? So I think that like there's something powerful, especially because like they're worried about the youth. Like that's what they are claiming with this rhetoric. They're worried about the youth. They're worried about the youth. So I think just, letting them speak is something powerful. I'm gonna be real. Out of 20 youth that I've heard speak, I'm just naming a number. I'm almost done. Um, Only like 2 or 3 have been like, I don't want a guy who's like a girl dressed up in my locker room, or I don't care what they do besides, I just don't want them in my school, The rest are like, let them be, you know? Um, and I think there's something really powerful about allyship and something really powerful about other students telling their own stories. This one person, and I can find it for you and send it to you if you want. It was really sad. This person was like, I am a trans boy. And he like had something very poetic. It was kind of poetic. He's like 30 seconds, and he just listed every 30 seconds like something happens, right? And he's like, and it can take you just 30 seconds to like legislate my rights away. What are you gonna choose? But yeah, I do think there's a state. I know that we move in the thing of power, not paranoia, and that's our group, And I do get scared, but I still, I think there's a something that's when we push back, and when we push back and tell our own stories and help the youth tell their stories, I think there's something very powerful. Mic drop. Any questions or any other points you wanted to name, Baba?
No, I was just trying to, and thank you, Chella, for that. I was trying to see what is obviously, besides other things, specific to surveillance and information gathering and the stalker state, how deep that would be as the assault is going to get heightened. I mean, we're looking at same things around, and of course, it's not as codified as in California as it is in Texas and many other states. So where they're even using like things like see something, say something type themes around reproductive access to reproductive health against just folks and young people around their trans. Yeah, so I think this is so just kind of learning from what the fight is and how are we establishing or setting up our fight, where social media surveillance would be a key thing and various other forms of just surveillance is going to be. Yeah, so that's where I was wanting to go to. Yeah, Matthias.
Yeah, hi, this is Matthew speaking, and thanks so much, Chella, for all that. It definitely made me think about a ton. And I think even just like, like the entire crux of it and the entire whole of it really makes me think about the importance of solidarity, and not just solidarity because it's nice and virtuous and it's important, but because it is a form of self-defense in opposition to a tactic employed by the state. In this instance, even when we think about, Black liberation, queer trans liberation, if we're not explicitly fighting for the most impacted people, then it is a mechanism of reform, and this is why we organize against reform to pick someone, to pick a group, to benefit and to continue to divert that harm to the most impacted people. So, like just even thinking about how certain communities are selected um, to be uplifted and represented within these institutions like policing. I'm thinking of like Black police officers and whatnot. And so, when you bring up Trump era, military bans and whatnot. Obviously, we know that that representation has never meant liberation or freedom for us. I think the downside to that is a lot of what these folks are doing in implementing codified bans or repealing quote unquote wins for our people is signaling that, hey, you're good to enact explicit violence against these groups. It is a dog whistle in a lot of ways to their masses. And similarly, when I think about what's going on here in LA, with those right-wing protesters who, anti-queer, anti-trans protesters at schools most recently, a lot of that is, even though that's not codified here in Los Angeles, what we did see, as we saw in 2020, was that police response to these protesters is always going to be very lenient, right? Because this is the police. Like these are people that are politically aligned with the police in a lot of ways. And so just thinking about that most recent protest in Glendale at the school board, there were reports, and this is the same thing we saw in anti-vaccine protests in 2020 and in Trump protests in 2020. The police were way more brutal against protesters who were there in defense of trans and queer youth, protesters who were critical of police, right? And I think that's what we're going to see more and more of. On the local surveillance end, I know within our War on Youth working group, we've seen the growth of LAPD's youth surveillance program called PATH, providing alternatives to hinder extremism. And whereas in the past, this program has been explicitly racist in who it targets, and this is a youth surveillance the program that deputizes teachers, school therapists, and community members to look for risk factors in extremism. It's now looking for one of the things they name and identify as a risk factor for extremism are gender identity issues, right? And so even in this local blue haven of LA, we have the LAPD explicitly pathologizing gender identity issues, plain and simple, and using that as a means to criminalize youth, gather their information, and further stalk them. So really grateful for all that history. Thank you, Shelley.
Yeah, I think it's crazy because Baba, I think we will be getting there soon where like there will be like a see something, say something thing. I know this is in another country, but in like I want to say Uganda, that's happening right now. Where there is like they are encouraging their excuse me, I'm sorry. They are encouraging their people to snitch on queer and trans people. And like I think that that's going to happen here as well. I think it might take some time, but it will. If it doesn't, if we're not going to stop it and chop it off at its head, I mean at its root, it will be like that soon. I also want as with reproductive rights, things are it's still people having to leave to like sanctuary cities. That's still having that conversation is like people I do want to give something to the community though, right? Like the trans and queer community, and like for the drag and for the trans issue and for the reproductive things, there's like conversations about what to do when you are pregnant and you want to unalive it, and yourself, like how to healthily do it yourself. And for like trans and queer people, there are folks that like we're we've always found stuff, I mean, that's where, let's be real, that's where bathhouses were formed. That's where, like I said, about queercore and queer punk, that's where queer punk was formed. You know what I mean? We will always find ways to keep each other safe. I don't think it will be within the state. because
Just
it
one thing,
stated.
Chella, sorry, I don't want to take too much space. I mean, before I forget, I mean, it is here. I mean, so now there's an app that was introduced at LAUSD. It's called LASAR, LASAR, and it has two functions, and it's basically a snitching app. So where students can call suspicious behavior on fellow students, yeah, Los Angeles Schools Anonymous Reporting, and where they can call, it's all about behavioral surveillance. They can call on each other and other things too. So I just wanted to throw that in there because when you were talking about it, it occurred to me. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but just wanted to throw that in there.
Okay. Yeah, I want to throw it to the crowd. Do y'all have any questions about these things? About any of this? About the laser program that Hamid just talked about the past program that Nachos talked about any of these things? Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Vanessa
Remember, you
had
can use the
their hand
chat.
up.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
Chella. Thank you, Chella. And one of the things that comes up for me is, and I said it like last week a little bit, but I'm really like, Olympics are coming, things like hair court are here. SB 43 is a bill that expands the definition of who can be conserved. So currently under SB 43, I mean, before SB 43, it's like if I was exhibiting behaviors that resulted in my inability to like find food, shelter, like in basic needs, like if I couldn't meet that, then I could be picked up and placed on a hold and then referred to conservatorship, where I would be like a ward of the court basically. And people in conservatorships, to get out of a conservatorship is really difficult, especially and this is just like proven for non-whites or poor whites, like everyone, like most people have reported very hard, difficult times, like just getting out of a conservatorship, as you can imagine. And under SB 43, now if you have a past, like I'm 11 years clean or whatever, right? Harm reduction helped to just, anyway, whatever. So I have a history of drug use, under SB 43. I'm also a bisexual person. Under SB 43, let's say if my family was upset, or whoever, my current partner is whoever the fuck is is upset with me, they could like legit be like, hey, Vanessa has a history of drug use, drug abuse, she's been incarcerated, she's got this history. I could then be picked up for observation. And when the police come to pick me up, I'm probably not going to just be like, chill. It's very traumatic. I have a lot, my kid, there's responsibility, right? Like, so I'm going to be displaying behaviors that further the notion that, ooh, there's something wrong, and one of the things where I'm going with it is that things like being inappropriately dressed is something that's making its way through care court. It's something that's making its way through SB 43. Where never in our history has substance use ever been something that you can be locked up away for outside of jail. Right? So there is no like lockdown drug facility. There's lockdown psych facilities that we fight to like, get rid of, in jails that we're fighting to get rid of. But this is like expanding that, right? And people within the substance use community are like, where are they going to place these people? So with the expansions of being inappropriately dressed and substance use, I can't help but to think of our community members who may find solace in using substances, right? Who, some people use substances for prayer and meditation, right? So it's a very vague, when you start policing what you can do, what you can't do, and then now I'm hearing about that laser app, which is extremely problematic, right? Because if you're a kid that has like parents who are just out of control, right? And there's some things off with you yourself, you could lean in on this app, right? And just fucking take it upon yourself to like just go ham. So if you've got like hella hateful parents or some shit and you're being raised in an environment that's really problematic, this opens the door for, things like conservatorship, because when, my daughter, my 22-year-old, is a beautiful trans woman, among many other things. And, I know, being raised in a queer home, like she's safe here, but with my grandma, like my grandma knows how to respect her now, and things of that sort. But like some of my aunts, if my kid was under my aunt's care, I mean, who know, so I have a friend who is queer and who was just sent to a place called Teen Challenge, which is a very Christian, like extremist place. So I'm very worried, right, that my friend that has been sent off to this place could be like spoken down to, right? Like traumatized, like who knows what the hell they're gonna tell them, So I guess my question is, how do we uplift and advocate for our community in a way that speaks to these apps like a laser? Like I work for Disability Rights California, and our LA office is right across the street from the LAUSD. So like who within the LAUSD do we contact? Or is it just like a lost cause? Like who's getting the information that's at this laser app? Like where does the information go? Who's screening it? How is it connected to police? Like all these, things. Because one of the things I'm interested in overall is, what I call the informant industrial complex, where through my own experience and that of many that I know, on a federal level, informants have these protections because there's bigger budgets. So you could get your name changed, sent off to wherever, right? A new identity, right? But at a city level, LAPD is utilizing, children and people that are finding themselves in like these crazy situations created by the police and the cycles of poverty that lead to the whole informant route. And it's gotten so crazy that if you're on drugs, right, you could, become an informant and like it's all chill or whatever, right? Because then, you probably get displaced and that may not be a big deal, but it is when you come to. But we're finding that, the LAPD is now operating within local street gangs. So a lot of guys and gals and humans, that are a part of these street gangs are actually working with the police. So it's not just like, a dope fiend gone cop. It's now we're seeing, no, this whole, and with everything going on with the LASD, with the sheriffs, right? We're like, all it's coming out, right? The gangs and all that. But when we think about, this culture of ratting each other out, and when we do a deep dive and when we see that this whole snitching thing is actually viewed in a way, how do I say, it's like developed by the same system that wants us to turn on each other, that wants us poor, that wants us in jail and locked facilities, that wants us without the services that we need. So how do we break through all that snitching by uplifting community, and like Chela said, talking about like education and calling things out like snitching, like, hey, like you will be utilized, letting the children know, letting the community know, if you've been contacted by the police, know that you're not alone. Know that many people have been in your position. Know that these are tactics, right? Rather than don't be a snitch, because then people that snitch then become even more silent. That keeps the fury going. Do you know what I mean? So like, as we see this type of behavior start now at the school level, right? How do we go in and uplift individuality, autonomy, community care, and salute, alternatives, like, the police isn't going to be there for you, right? Like this app isn't, right? And it's not like if someone finds out they're going to kill you and your family, right? It's more like this is a tactic that preys upon your vulnerability, right? And here are other ways for you to engage. So I guess, I don't know. I mean, that was just a whole lot, but I'll pause there. And thank you so much to everyone. And the Olympics are coming.
Go ahead, Nachos.
Hey, this is Matthew speaking. I just want to quickly thank Vanessa for raising all that, and it's all incredibly connected. And your question touched on so many aspects of, what we've been thinking about when addressing the Lazar app and even sophistications in youth surveillance. And SB 43 is totally related. And just to provide a bit of background, this Lazar app is very much rooted in, see something, say something, suspicious activities reports. It's even SAR. It's incorporated in there, but it did come about. This app came about after the LAPD finally got this targeted violence and terrorism prevention grant from the Department of Homeland Security, which is a rebrand of an older grant, right, called Countering Violent Extremism, that the city tried to get in 2018, but the coalition, alongside with groups like the Palestinian Youth Movement and UTLA, the LAUSD Teachers Union, fought against, because it was explicitly racist, these indicators for extremism that they were talking about. What we've seen since then, because this program called CVE, Countering Violent Extremism, was kind of discredited nationally, was a rebrand, right? So they changed the name as one to TVTP, Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention, but the other is the language around this risk factor assessment program, this extremism policing program has shifted from, it's less so this notion of looking for terrorism or extremism, where now we're kind of seeing like they're using public health language, plain and simple. In fact, in 2020, we saw a civil and human rights panel that featured this guy, Dr. David Eisenman, who's out of UCLA, who's one of the architects of this program, talking about how we need to start thinking about hate as a pathology, right? We need to track hate as a pathology, and we need to monitor it. Now, hate in the US standard typically means like any behavior exhibited by Black, Brown, Indigenous, Muslim people. And so to hear that being said, that gave us some inkling of where this kind of was headed. And we're also seeing the Department of Mental Health being brought in to address these risk factors for extremism among youth. So anyway, that's just to point out, how things have kind of been teed up for this Lazar app to roll out. And as to where this information goes, one of the big things the coalition talks about is the information sharing environment, right? Or the stalker state. And none of it lives in a vacuum. Maybe I'll drop the link to kind of highlight how this is all shared. But within LA and even across the state, all these local and state agencies and federal agencies share their information within a place called the Fusion Center, right? The local one is up in Norwalk. It's called JRIC, Joint Regional Intelligence Center. And just to give you an indication of, this Lazar app and this PATH program that the LAPD has, its proximity to this understanding of how information is shared when the LAPD announced that they were trying to get this grant, or they had been awarded this grant, and they were ramping up this local program, PATH, providing alternatives to hinder extremism, they put forward, a candidate to direct it, and it was this cop, LAPD officer named Alex Vargas, who up until this point, his job was to manage, well, he was the LAPD head for this fusion center, this information gathering hub. And in fact, one of the things he was lauded for doing in the Fusion Center was overseeing the surveillance of protests, the George Floyd protests in 2020. So a focus on Black and brown youth. And even within that pitch, that proposal for an expansion of the PATH program, one of the things they cite is the success of the suspicious activities report, which was not a success. In fact, it was the coalition's work. And I'd invite Hamid to talk a little bit about that highlighted just how racist that program was. And it was kind of that community power that slowed it up in some ways. And so, I say all this to say, like, this entire response has kind of ramped up as a result of 2020. And it's in response to the fact that, organizing has led, primarily that of Students Deserve and other groups, has led to the removal of Los Angeles school police from schools, right? So this is a response to that, to kind of the defanging of police in some ways. So this is another entry point for them that they're responding to. And just really briefly, and I do really want to invite Ham to talk a little bit about the SARS program and kind of the information sharing environment and how it plays into this. I do want to say, we still feel, we have always felt the urgency around addressing this. And so we're fighting back for sure. And one way we're doing that is by organizing students, and teachers within LAUSD schools, and just different folks, invested community members to fight back against it. So it's not a done deal, but I don't think, I think priority number one right now is really letting people know that this is in play right now. And the students we've been working with, they feel urgency around it too. They see the vulnerabilities. We've had students straight up say, like, what if someone just spam mass reports me just to mess with me? And that will lead to further criminalization just off of that. So it's something we're working on. We invite folks into the War on Youth space to talk about it more. But lastly, again, that tie-in is the language is now more in these presentations for the PATH program, that of gender identity issues, that of mental health problems, very tied to this trajectory of where SB 43 is headed, right? So yeah. I'll pass it over to you, Ahmed.
Oh, yeah, and I'll just keep it very brief. You covered quite a bit there, Martio, so thank you for doing that. I think Vanessa raises a really good point too, because what Vanessa is pointing to is like this very deep culture of deputization. That, everybody wants to be deputized. Everybody wants to have that sheriff's badge. Everybody wants to kind of this whole romanticization of cowboys and Indians, and let's go get them. Let's go get these bad guys. I want to be deputized. I want to have that authority of the law. And this, so there's a whole narrative and a culture that we live in that is, it comes with a lot of. So I think it's also, when we talk about deputization and snitching and people reporting, the suspicious activity reporting program was very much rooted in post 9/11, the 9/11 Commission, and it really has set the tone and really a foundation for where we are today, because it's very much driven by behavioral surveillance and data mining. So you just have to observe people's behavior. And it's very much driven by speculative policing, that people are pre-operational planning. That's a language that is used, observed behavior, reasonably indicative of pre-operational planning. So, this is all like, legitimizing hunch-based policing, but who is going to be the target of that hunch? Just from broken taillight to broken windows policing to everything else. So I think that's where this information goes in, and it's deeply racist. When we force them to do an audit of these programs, over 32% of the secret files, and they are secret, were open on individuals who were identified as Black. And when they had gender identified, 50% were Black women. And these are national security programs. So I think they have set such a foundation, and that's to your point, Vanessa. I mean, I think I'd invite you to also, our next Tuesday is going to be the fight against the war on youth. where that's where the, Martios and Akhil and other folks talk quite a bit about that and what's being planned, what kind of research is going on, what sort of public records have been filed. And yeah, I mean, the coalition is also in the SB 43 fight as well. So because all of that is absolutely connected. Like, one of our working groups has been looking at the intersection of the police state and public health. How information sharing happens, how data is being collected, how data is being moved. So I think there's much to be said, but I think there's a big fight that we continue to need to build. And as Martius was saying, it's really about just how do we spread out, how do we get out there. I mean, in this case, in Lazar, the youth are the most directly impacted. How do we follow the youth's leadership and let them also kind of just work in partnership with the youth too. And we have like the summer internship with Fairfax High School students that we are working with. Martios and Akhil are working, spent 17 weeks of a fellowship with 2nd through 6th graders. So I think there's much to be done and much to be said. So yeah, but thank you though. Back to you, Chella.
Wow. Does anybody else have any questions for Ahmed or Machos or myself around anything we discussed tonight?
I'm sorry, I do. I have a question. So, if I want to tweet something out today, or every time I go to a meeting, I want to share some a takeaway, right? Just to build that momentum and just to keep it, keep things, just to mobilize. What are after let's say what are ways that I can engage community through social media, through how what would be an appropriate way to do it? What's follow-up messaging?
One thing I can quickly say is, and this is coming from me, who really is less than zero when it comes to these kind of things around social media use and all of that we have a very, very active social media presence, Vanessa, and we use that as a way for community education and popular education. A lot of times, you would see. So I don't know, Matthias, I'll let you, speak to that.
Yeah, this is Mateo speaking. Yeah, tag us, I think would be the best way to do it. These meetings are also recorded and they'll be on YouTube after if you want to cut a short clip of something that you found interesting. Yeah, I think tagging us is kind of the best way to send folks to our stuff. Another thing is if there is something that sticks out, we might have popular education materials about it, right? We might have a zine or something like it. So if you want to DM us or on Instagram or Twitter at Stop LAPD Spying and say, hey, do you have any more info on this? We could maybe direct you to something we've already created. And, if that's something you want to amplify, that's a really cool, neat, concise way to do so. But yeah, I think that's it.
I just posted that Venn diagram for the Stalker State if folks want to take a look at it. It's in chat. It's a PDF document.
Anyone else have any questions? Comments?
Thank you,
What?
Chad. Appreciate this. A wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. All right. Yes. Well, that concludes it. You'll also join us next week for our other group, which is going to be the Warren Youth, which is looking at how the state criminalizes youth through all the programs that Nachos was listing earlier. I don't know the topic, but I know that it's going to be lit. I go there. So yeah, join us. Any other announcements? There you go. Any announcement?
I'll jump in real quick. Yeah, like Hamid was saying, our internship starts this Thursday with these Fairfax High School students, and we're very excited about that. But in addition, we're going to be having our second, monthly youth at the park day, and this is just an open invitation for any youth. Like Hamid was saying, we worked with first through fifth graders and high schoolers as well. So this is just kind of a third space. It's a Saturday, likely at Vista Hermosa Park. And let me find the exact date of that third Saturday for this month, and I'll post it in the chat. But we'll have a flyer out for it. So if you have any students in your life, any youth in your life, and you want them to just come out to a rad space and talk to other youth and just make art, we make t-shirts and whatnot. Yeah, we'd love to have you. And then we'll also be doing another monthly movie night on the last Friday of this month too. So just look out for those, and I'll plug the dates in the chat.
Thank you, Macho. Any other announcements? Going once, going twice. So, okay, thank you for joining, y'all. Have a good night. Please take care of yourselves. It's things are getting heavy. So whatever that looks like, water, it looks like drinking, substances, Tonight's not my drinking night, so that's gonna be real. I'm gonna be drinking tomorrow though. Hey. Have a good night, y'all. See y'all next week, hopefully,
Good
for the War on
night.
Youth.
Good night. Thank you, Shella. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Peace.